sadhana is the practice aspect of yoga, being a set of practices that leads you on a path towards a state. So it's like anything that we do that supports our movement towards the realization of who we actually are and what's actually going on. And you can remember that the kind of way that yoga came about is there was just like in many religious traditions, there's kind of a rigidification around a priestly group who says that we are the intermediaries between you and the divine, and you have to pay us, and then we'll get you what you want. So yoga was a response to that. It was a response, and also there was a lot of social factors going on at the time when yoga emerged, but a lot of it had to do with urbanization, people coming together, society becoming more rigid than it had been, and people reacting to that and saying, no, we can know ourselves, we can explore and experience ourselves. So lots of different streams and paths of yoga emerged at that time. The word yoga was used before that, but this is where we get into the sense of yoga as like an intensified personal communal exploration. And the ashrams developed, the people were called shramanas who were doing this, strivers, people like going for it, basically. Shramanas, like the people who were going for it. So they grouped together in ashrams, they had guru shishya lineages, and they discovered all different kinds of things, and they shared information among each other. And so many of the texts that we know from today, the Yoga Sutras, the Bhagavad Gita, these are a synthesis of lots of different teachings and lots of different paths, people studying and exploring and sharing information, and then they come together in a synthesis. So sadhana are the things that people were doing as they explored, and it includes everything from meditation to worship, to kind of physical practices of self-mortification. Like I mentioned last time, some people will just hold their arm up like that forever, and you can see people, and this is still today, where their arm has kind of grown into that shape because they keep it like that. People make a vow of silence, that's their sadhana, they don't, and there's this kind of crossover between vrata is the word for vow, and sadhana. Both, because the crossover is that both of them have the intention of both burning up karma and sanskars, the seeds that populate into our consciousness, that play themselves out, the seeds of belief, thought, emotion, and reactivity that we carry with us into this lifetime. It's kind of burning up those seeds and the kind of karmic inclinations. And because it cuts identification, the purpose of both vrata and sadhana is to cut identification with the kind of impulsive needs of the body, the body mind. The needs, or let's say the messages of the body mind that take us away from the intentionality to know what's true. So the inclinations of the body mind that pull us in the other direction, sadhana and vrata both are intended to break those. And I'm going to talk about surrender in three kind of contexts. One being surrender at the end of the path of yoga. So in the yoga traditions, there are stories and teachings and people who embody surrender at the end of a long progressive path. There's also surrender as the path, surrender as the sadhana. And then there's also people who just surrender, and that's it, right away, immediate surrender. And the Shiva Bhakti, the Kashmir Shaiva tradition, has a very specific framework for all of these things, these kind of different kinds of awakening. So I'll talk about that a little bit at the end. But first, I want to give a definition or kind of an orientation to the word surrender. From what I understand, what I could gather online, resources available. Surrender has basically two senses, and it comes from actually all the way back to Sanskrit. So the sense of to give something starts in what, I don't know how much I should talk about Proto-Indo-European, but that's a whole nother tangent of linguistics. But basically, let's just say there's two parts of surrender. There's sur and render breaks up into this dare, which has to do with giving. So it's like giving back. To render something is to give something over or to give it back, and sur is like over. So it's like, it's kind of an emphasis, above, over and above, to give something back over and above. And so these two senses are to yield, to cease resistance or submit. That's kind of one sense. Yielding, like, okay, I give up. I surrender. I give up. And the other one is to hand over a right or a possession. So to say, here, you take this thing that I thought was mine, but I'm going to give it to you. Whether it's a right, or it's something, a physical thing, or it's a person, we can surrender a person. So these two senses of yielding and handing over, obviously there's some crossover, but we'll kind of use that as our understanding of what surrender is. And I'll start talking about the surrender at the end of the path of yoga. So this is relevant to our last conversation about tapas, because, you know, there's the sense that in the Yoga Sutra specifically, it's basically a sequential text. It says, you do this, you do this, you do this, then this happens, then this happens, then this happens. It's very kind of sequential like that. The progressive burning of the kleshas and the karmashaya, the seeds of karma, through abhyasa, vairagya, and ishvara pranidhana. Essentially, that's the teaching of the Yoga Sutra. Intensive, intentional meditation, release of attachment, and ishvara pranidhana, laying down, you know, giving over to the Lord. Create a progressive burning of the kleshas. The kleshas are like the obstacles to knowing. And the karmashaya, the built-up storehouse of karma that plays itself out in our consciousness. So the Yoga Sutras, there's all these parts of it. There's the 8 limbs that are quite specific about what to do. And then it talks about all the different, if you practice samyama on this and this and this and that, then you get all these different siddhis. And then towards the end, it says, once you see, like all these siddhis are just distractions, basically. And once you see the cause in the effect, so the cause being the timeless, unseen, motionless, divine that exists beyond, the Purusha, the soul of everything, once you see the cause in the effect, everything that we see and touch and hear and smell is the effect. Once you see, everywhere you look, every sound you hear, every interaction you have, you realize the cause in that effect. So you're no longer distorted by thinking that the effect is the cause. You see that there's a cause underneath every effect. Then you lose the sense of I-ness, or one loses the sense of I-ness. One loses the inclination to say, what am I, and why was I, and what will I be, and what, you know. And once one loses the sense of I-ness, we gravitate towards freedom. We gravitate towards kaivalya, is the word in the Yoga Sutra. Some samskaras arise, but one by one we return them back to their source, and then we surrender. So this is kind of an embodiment of this, bless you, basic framework of tapas leading up to, so the Yoga Sutras is very much a text of tapas in the sense of intentionality, in the sense of a practice, in the sense of abhyasa, continuous persevering practice over time, meditation, samyama, you know, it really advocates for that. And yet, in the 4th pada, the Kaivalya pada, like the 29th sutra or something, so like almost at the very end, it says, and then you surrender. This is my very concise translation. And when you surrender, what happens is there's an arising of something called the Dharma Megha, the Dharma Megha Samadhi, the cloud of Dharma. Megha means cloud. The cloud of Dharma. So a cloud, is full of liquid. A cloud is full of the potential for rain. So this cloud is full of Dharma. It's full of virtue. It's full of truth. And when that ultimate surrender happens, the surrender through which one no longer even desires insight, no longer even desires realization, then this rain, so it's like a relinquishing of all desires, even the desire for liberation. When that happens, then there's this rain from the cloud of virtue, this grace that happens. So even the Yoga Sutra holds this kind of sense that you can get as far as you can get on your own. And when you get there, then grace is what's needed to take you beyond. In his epic poem, Savitri, Sri Aurobindo spends chapters and pages, hundreds of pages, describing the yoga of Ashwapati. And he goes to all these different worlds and he experiences all these different things, and he goes below and above and everywhere. And at the end, he comes to nirvana. He reaches this endless nothingness. And in that space of the endless nothingness, the Divine Mother appears. So it's like he goes as far as he can go. He's taken himself as far as the human intellect, the human will can take him. And what he gets at the end of that is the realization that nothing is real. Nothing that looks real, that looks solid, is real. And yet there is something that is real, and that's the Divine Mother. And she appears and she blesses him. So again, there's this kind of tapas, this intentionality, this work that leads to a point that cannot, that's the end. That's as far as you can go on. One can go on their own. And Sri Aurobindo talks about aspiration and surrender being kind of the two things that are needed. Aspiration to a certain point, and then surrender is needed. The other archetype or the model that we have in the yogic tradition for this kind of thing is that of Ravana or Bali. Ravana is the villain in the Ramayana. He's a 10-headed demon who steals Sita and threatens to eat her if she won't become his wife. And Sita is Rama's wife. And Rama is a divine incarnation, as is Sita. So Ravana's kind of in for it from the beginning, because he's set himself up where the only thing that he wants is to steal the Divine Mother and make her his own. Ravana, interestingly, is a kind of a spiritual genius. The reason he got to be so powerful is that he performed tapas for millions of years and got a boon from Shiva. He was a Shiva Bhakta, and he was intensely devoted to Shiva. And so his tapas produced incredible intelligence, incredible power, incredible, capacity. And so he has all this energy, and he uses it for destruction, for manipulation, for self-aggrandizement. And in the end, he also is liberated by the touch of Rama when Rama kills him. And so there's even and the same thing happens with Bali and many other, the Mahishasura, many other demons, villains in the yogic texts. Bali is the same thing, practices intense tapas, gains a lot of power, uses it for his own aggrandizement. And Vishnu incarnates reluctantly, because Bali is a Vaishnavite, so he's a devotee of Vishnu, and Vishnu's like, well, I kind of like the guy, but I'll incarnate as a dwarf and I'll trick him. So Bali has this kind of repartee with the Vamana incarnation of Vishnu, and Vishnu's a very small person and says, basically, it's like one of these things where he kind of backs him into a corner, and he says, okay, you owe me something. And Bali's like, okay, what do you want? He's like, I'll just take as much land as I can cover in 3 steps. And Bali's like, oh, sure, no problem, little person. And then he becomes as large as the universe and takes 3 steps around the whole universe. And then Bali says, you've tricked me, you can cut off my head now. And so again, but it's an act of surrender. It's an act of acknowledgement. It's an act of surrender that's embodied in that archetype. And in the Devi Mahatmya, the Mahishasura buffalo demon is also vanquished by Durga and is liberated through her touch. So this is like, these beings who build power, use it for their own aggrandizement, use it to kind of cultivate a sense of separateness when the truth is not that. And in the end, the divine liberates them. There's examples of spiritual teachers, kind of modern-ish, who just woke up one day. And there's examples of spiritual teachers who did a lot of practice. And I mentioned this teacher that we learned about in Tiruvannamalai, Yogi Ram Surat Kumar. He traveled all around and met lots of teachers, and eventually went to one teacher and he gave him the practice of Ram Nam. So he went and chanted Ram's name for some period of weeks in a cave, and that is what led to his liberation and awakening. So there was a practice involved. So all of this is just to say that there's a surrender that comes as a natural consequence of a period of intentionality and a period of practice. There's not like 2 separate things. You either should be surrendering or you should be practicing. And there's a point at which the tapas model gives way, and surrender is necessary. Grace is necessary. In many traditions, it's understood that there is no awakening without grace. It's not possible. It's not something that can be done. One can't force their own awakening. Now, there are examples, and I'm going to jump to surrender at the beginning in a way. There are examples of people who have, like Swami Kripalu's story, is that he was in such a state of despair that he was ready to jump into a river. And that's when his guru appeared. And it's the same for this teacher named Sri M, modern teacher. He was wandering in the Himalayas. He had gotten all the way there. He couldn't find anybody to teach him anything, and he was ready to jump in a river and end his life. So there's this intensity of longing and despair that brings forth a response. And that's not necessarily like, in both of those cases, the understanding is that they had performed lots of tapas in previous lives and kind of ripened themselves to the point where they were ready for what happened in this lifetime. But in that life, it's not like they, the emphasis is on like all the practice they did. The emphasis is on kind of they were giving up. And again, this is the sense of surrender. They just had enough with this world and this illusion and delusion and confusion and manipulation and all these things of the world. They just had enough, and they were ready to end it. And that's when their teacher appeared and brought them forward. That's not something you can really fake, that it's not, that the despair is not self-pitying, that the despair is connected to a longing to know, a longing for self-realization. Just like, surrender itself can't really be faked. And I think that's something relevant. There's a sense, especially when we say yield, you imagine like a battle and one of the sides of the battle surrenders, right? They give up. We have this sense of surrender as a passive activity. But because of the assertion of the ego, the constant assertion of the ego, surrender can't really be a passive activity, because the ego will always seek to assert itself. And so surrender has to be something that's happening all the time up to a certain point. Until the surrender is total and integrated fully, we have to actually do the surrender. So surrender isn't a passive thing. It's a very active thing, and we are very much responsible for the sincerity of the surrender and keeping it real. So surrender is also a path in itself. Surrender is a sadhana. And before I kind of talk in specifics about that, I'll just say that it helps to understand what are we surrendering to when surrender is a sadhana itself. We talked before, I mean, we've talked a lot about kind of the truth of our deeper being. So that's one thing that one can surrender to, the truth of the deeper being. One can surrender to the wholeness, the intelligence. You know, I know that my intelligence is only capable of so much synthesis of, like, I don't really know what's best for the whole earth. I don't really know what's best for the cosmos. I can really only, in some ways, tell what's best for me. And so I can know that there is an intelligence that knows that can synthesize all the different factors and understand what's best in this moment in a way that my rational, the mind that kind of cuts things up and adds them up and subtracts them and makes a math problem out of everything can't really do. There's a holistic, organic intelligence that's bigger than me, that's more comprehensive than me, and I can surrender to that. And I can surrender to the love that is the center of the universe, the love that creates all things, the love that unites everything and creates everything. In some ways, this requires a shraddha. To the extent that we haven't had the experience that those, or we don't have a consistent integrated experience, that there is a loving creative force that flows through and unites the universe, that we don't have a consistent experience that there is a higher intelligence, that there's something positive out there, that it's not just a big empty vast bunch of stars and rocks and burning stuff, that we're not just like a random occurrence of molecules and atoms, that there's something positive and intentional and intelligent out there. If we aren't in this moment holding a consistent awareness of that, then we need to have faith that it's there. And the faith is not necessarily like a blindness. It's not like well, let's say it's not like, it's like pretending. Faith is not necessarily a pretending. It is a intentional experiment. It's like saying, let's pretend, let's imagine that this is real and see what happens and see how serious I can be about it. I guess the word pretending isn't it. It's more like we're not making something up. We're creating conditions in our own consciousness through which a potentiality emerges to be changed by the conditions that we've created inside our consciousness. We create a system inside of ourselves that allows for growth of a certain kind, growth of a certain thing. So that's the what. The what is love, endless intelligence, and endless beingness. And when it has been said that when you give everything to that one gives everything to you. When you give everything that you are, when you offer everything that you are to that one offers everything that it is to you. So there's this, what I give is very small and compared to what I receive. What I'm offering is my small, limited consciousness, and what I'm receiving is the whole universe. What I'm offering is the love that I can manage, given the realizations that I've had, and what I receive is the love that transcends all realization. So that's the what. And then what are we surrendering? So we can be surrendering thoughts, we can be surrendering beliefs, judgments, strategies, plans, anxieties. We can be surrendering our entitlement to emotions. I deserve to feel this way, don't question me. I deserve to be angry and resentful and despairing and hopeless and all these things. And we can surrender, so like the mental level, the emotional level, and we can surrender our will, our actions, our intentions, our aspirations. And when we surrender on the mental level, we let go of the need to know and the need to be right. We let go of the need to understand and rationally comprehend. And when we surrender on the emotional level, we let go of the entitlement, the feeling like we deserve these feelings. And when we surrender on the level of the will, we let go of the ownership of our life. We say, I don't own my life. This higher being owns my actions and my intentions and my life. We say to the divine, thy will be done, as is said in the Christian tradition, thy will be done, or I am yours, to the divine. We make an offering of ourselves. And this is back to the yajna that we talked about, the sacrifice, putting oneself, one sense of self into the fire and saying, I am yours. Do with me as you will. Make my life an offering to you, and make all that I do, all that I say, all that I put out into the world, an offering to you. Worship, prayer, writing, singing songs and poems, having an inner orientation toward humility, activating the longing for union, all of these are sadhanas, all these are practices. So, puja is a practice that we've experienced here. Arati, there's kind of particular rituals in different traditions that are practices and sadhanas. Prayer, saying prayers, writing prayers, offering prayers, singing devotional songs. All these things bring us into a spirit of surrender. So they cultivate the experience of surrender. And the other, any meditation can be a surrender also, if that's what we're doing, if we're surrendering our thoughts and our beliefs. But a lot of this stuff happens in real time. When we think we know something and we feel like we need to know something, we can surrender what we think we know, and we can surrender the need to know and the need to be right. When we feel like our life circumstances are not good and we want to be in control of them, we can surrender control. We can say, I accept things as they are. When somebody else, whether somebody who's in a position of power or somebody close to us that we care about, is acting in a way that we don't think is a good way, and we want to control them and we want to make them act in a different way, we can surrender control and accept that they are who they are and their evolution is proceeding according to its own trajectory, and that we're not in control of that. And there's nothing that we can do to change the trajectory of their awakening other than to be present and supportive as they need support. So surrender can happen in a kind of closed situation, in a meditation, in an exercise, and it can also happen in any moment of life when we're confronted by something that creates an experience of attachment or aversion. And we can surrender the attachment or the aversion and accept the circumstances as grace. The practice that Ramana Maharshi gave, the inquiry, who am I, is essentially a process of surrender. And it's on the mental level, it's on the level of Gyan Yoga, Jnana Yoga, right? So who am I? Am I this body? Am I my thoughts? Am I my relationships? Am I my preferences? Am I the kinds of clothes I like to wear? Am I the things that people think about me? You know, as you kind of go through each of these things and you detect that there is an I that is deeper and beyond each of those things, there's a level of surrendering of all those identifications that happens. So who am I? Who am I? Who am I is an active process of surrender that takes us deeper and deeper into ourselves. Yogi Ram Surat Kumar and Ramana and Anandamayi Ma and other modern and ancient saints have referred to themselves in the third person out of a recognition that there is this being that is living out its own life, and then there's this force behind that comes through and animates that being and radiates out into the world. Yogi Ram Surat Kumar referred to himself as this beggar. So he would say, this beggar is crazy. Don't listen to anything I say. Don't listen to anything he says. My Father does everything. Everything that you experience in my presence is not this beggar. It's the Father. The Father does it all. So he's surrendering that his whole identification and also his kind of public countenance and saying, no, don't even worry about that. That there's something else behind that is doing everything that's important here. Anandamayi Ma would say this body. She would refer to herself as this body, or this girl. Yeah. So surrender is always possible. It's always nurturative. It always cultivates a deepening of the spiritual process and the spiritual path. It always brings us forward, because the truth is that, as I said at the beginning, there's we often mistake the effect for the cause. And in the Sankhya session, you may remember that we talked about how even our thoughts and our experience of self, ahankara, the thing that gravitates the sense of I, that hangs all of our different, gives us the experience of being individuated. Even that is an effect. So basically everything that we normally experience as self is an effect. And the cause is something behind. The cause is something, this animating principle, this energy of love that flows from the invisible, timeless, spaceless realm and through us into our embodiment and lights us up. It's like a robot that you turn on. The thing that turns us, that makes us on, is if the cause. And so surrendering attachment and identification with the effect creates space for the cause, the love, the intelligence, the harmony, that radiance to flow through and become more real, more embodied, more a part of our daily existence. And there's an interaction that can happen where we call for the divine to take over more control of our life, to be more present in life. So it's not just about waiting for something to happen and then saying, okay, I surrender. You can also say, please determine the course of my life. Everything that I am is yours. I don't own my life. May I receive what I need from you. So, the prayer, may I receive everything that I need from you. May I receive everything that I need from the love that is the creative force of the universe. First, you say the prayer and then you trust that it's happening. So what if I was receiving everything that I need, everything that I actually need? I may think I need certain things. Other people may tell me I need certain things. But what if everything that I actually need is being given to me? And there's this dynamic between the prayer and the trust that can happen, so that the prayer doesn't stop because the trust is there. The prayer continues and the trust continues. The call continues and the receiving continues. And both of those are two sides of the same coin. There's no call without a response. When we call to the divine responds. So those two sides of the same coin, we ask, we pray, we call, we continually affirm our commitment to being in a state of surrender and receiving what we need from the divine. And then at the same time, we accept everything, all circumstances, everything that we have, whether we, on a certain level, like it or don't like it, or prefer it or don't prefer it, as a gift of grace from the divine. We accept it all and are grateful. I mean, even we can be grateful for things that normally we wouldn't prefer. This is transformative. I mean, I'm saying a lot of words. I'm just kind of, describing a potentiality here, but it's transformative to live in that space, because there's nothing to worry about in that space. There's nothing to plan for. We live with our nervous systems constantly in a state of readiness for what bad thing is going to happen next. Like somebody's going to, throw us another ball to juggle. We're already juggling so many balls. Somebody's going to throw us another one any second. I better be ready. Our nervous systems are constantly in that state of hyper-awareness, ready for the other ball. So when you enter into that state of prayer and acceptance and receiving grace, then that hypertension, that hyper-awareness is no longer necessary. And we can accept the flow of life as it's flowing through from the invisible space into the visible space. It's more like sitting next to a river and watching the river go past than it is about being ready for something. When we watch a river go past, we're not generally waiting, what's going to happen next? What's going to come down? Is it going to get me? It's just, we watch it and we appreciate it, and it's a piece of art. I mean, it's an unfolding miracle. And all of life can be experienced that way, as an unfolding miracle, just a breathless, oh my God, what is going to happen next? Oh, look at it, it's happening. The flower is unfolding right now in front of me, and every second it's becoming more and more radiant, more and more beautiful. And all of life, it's not just my life and my experience, because there's people all around me all the time who are unfolding and flowering in the same way. Nature itself is unfolding and flowering. The earth is awakening in the same way. So we can experience all of life like that. And I'm just going to read you a little piece from something that the mother wrote called Prayers and Meditations. So there's a whole book of her prayers and meditations that she wrote when she was younger, probably in her 20s and 30s. This is from 1913. And she passed away in 1973. So that's 60 years before she passed away, and she was in her 90s. So yeah, so she was in her 30s. So I think the reason I want to read it to you is it's an example of the voice of this kind of surrender. And I'm going to just take the liberty to change the thys into yours, just because thy sounds strange to our modern ear. And you can receive this however you like, with your eyes closed or open, and just try to let yourself be soft and receptive. O Lord, inconceivable splendor, may your beauty spread through all the earth. May your love be kindled in every heart, and your peace reign over all. A deep and solemn chant, smiling and subtle, rises from my heart. And I don't know whether this chant goes from me to you, or comes from you to me, or whether you and I and the entire universe are this marvelous chant of which I have just become conscious. Surely there is no longer any you, or any I, or any separate universe. Only an immense harmony is there, sublime and infinite, which is all things and of which all things will one day grow aware. It is the harmony of boundless love, love victorious over all suffering and all obscurity. By this law of love, your law, I want to live more and more. I want to live more and more integrally. To it, I unreservedly give myself, and all my being exults in an inexpressible peace. So she acknowledges this love, this chant, this vibration, this movement, this flow. She acknowledges it and sees it, recognizes that she doesn't know if she is it or it is speaking to her or through her or what. And surely there is no separation. It's all just one. And then she prays, may I give myself more and more to this flow, to this love, to this law of love. And it's not just a rigid, static law of love. It's an immense harmony of which all things will one day grow aware. An immense harmony of which all things will one day grow aware implies a movement, a transformation, a collective growing into that awareness of harmony. So she prays to be to live more and more integrally, to give herself more and more integrally to it, unreservedly to it. I mean, this is surrender, unreserved self-giving to the law of love and harmony, the evolving and emerging law of love and harmony.